Gospel Sound and Vision presents Benny and the Toaster. Story by Bernard H. Norris, drawings by Jesse Weir, music by Brian Gartrey, titles by Len Gambling. Benny is a little lad, about 10 years or so, and even though not very bad, he isn't good, you know. A chunky British schoolboy with rosy cheeks complete. His hair is never tidy, his socks down by his feet. He doesn't cause the trouble or do things which are wrong. He simply happens to be there to help it all along. He's got such good intentions, it really seems so sad that all his finest efforts never make folk glad. Now Benny has a dog called Asp. She's got this funny name because they say she's all spare parts. I know, it seems a shame. She's very loyal and faithful and patriotic too, and such a pal to Benny in all he tries to do. She isn't any breed of dog that you or I could spot. She's just a mixture of them all, so Asp's the name she's got. It's written on her collar, it's written on her dish, but since she cannot read a word, no other name she'd wish. Now one day, Mum and Dad went out, and Benny was alone. He thought he'd lay the table for their tea when they got home. He felt so very happy as he went along. He never dreamed that everything he tackled would go wrong. The tablecloth he laid across the table with a swish. The draught it made disturbed a vase, which fell down with a crash. It shattered all in pieces. It was an awful sound. Benny gazed in horror as it lay there on the ground. "Oh, crumbs, I'd better get a brush and sweep up all the mess," said Benny. Then he turned around and fell right over Asp. For Asp is so inquisitive. She just could not resist a look at all the pieces and give them all a sniff. Asp didn't think that Benny would fall right over her. She tipped her nose, then glared at him and bristled all her fur. Asp was most indignant. It really wasn't fair. The safest place was off the floor, so she jumped on a chair. Benny got up off the floor, patted Asp, who grinned, and muttered, "I suppose I'd better put 'em in the bin." Benny cleared the pieces, and then began to place the butter, jam and sugar, the saucers, cups and plates. Some cream cake from the larder, some milk from out the fridge, a bowl of fruit, then jelly and custard near the edge. He felt quite glad and happy at the table he had laid, and really rather proud of all the effort he had made. Then Benny in the kitchen started cutting up the cheese, preparing all the salad, even washing lettuce leaves. The water sprinkled over him, ran up his sleeve and arm, but it really didn't matter. He wasn't doing harm. Meanwhile, in the dining room, Asp, tired of sitting down, she'd watched young Benny on the table put such good things down. The table now seemed crowded with most attractive fare, so Asp thought she would sample some, and jumped up from the chair. She landed in the custard, which spattered everywhere. She tumbled out half-blinded, missed the edge and took the air. She felt herself just falling helplessly in space, with custard in her eyes and ears and halfway down her face. She wildly grabbed at something. Claws gripped the tablecloth. The sudden jerk just pulled the lot and everything fell off. With plates and saucers round her she hurtled to the ground, while Benny in the kitchen heard the awful sound. Crash, wallop, tumble, clatter. It all fell on the floor. Poor Benny jumped, left everything and rushed in at the door. Oh no, it just can't be," he muttered in despair. But sure enough, the dreadful mess was staring at him there. Hastily, he grabbed a broom and swept the heap outside. He then left Asp to mop it up and cast the rest aside. She set to work with joyful glee, so happy at the sight of all this food, and so she licked and lapped with great delight. Now Dad had bought a toaster, the pop-up kind, you see, which pops the toast up just to show when it is done for tea. It really is so simple, his Mum and Dad had said. You only need to plug it in and then put in the bread. Ben suddenly remembered about this pop-up toaster. Ah, that would make life easier. Tea would be ready faster. Of course, he said, I'll just make toast. That's easy and so quick. He got Dad's pop-up toaster and gave the switch a flick. Pieces of bread he put inside and then sat back to wait. He'd sit until it popped and then just put them on a plate. He wasn't really sure how long the bread would take to cook, and so he sat and waited and sometimes had a look. But no, it wouldn't pop at all. They sat inside and burned, and soon the room was full of smoke. Poor old Benny moaned. It doesn't seem to matter what I try to do. Everything is going wrong. Poor Benny was so blue. He pushed another couple in. Asp thought it all a joke, but Benny didn't laugh when both of these went up in smoke. He tried again, but still no good. Another two were burned. He tried once more, and then again, until poor Benny learned he'd used a loaf of bread, complete. Yes, every slice had gone. He ran round to the baker's then to get another one. This tea idea is going wrong. I've tried my best and failed. It's all that jolly toaster's fault, poor old Benny wailed. Just then he heard his mother and his father coming home. Oh dear, oh what a mess I'm in. Benny gave a groan. His mother wasn't very pleased to find her living room just cluttered up with burned up bread and all in smoky gloom. And when she found the mess outside with her best vase out there, she sent young Benny up to bed, almost in despair. It's not my fault, Ben muttered. That toaster burned the bread. But Mother said, Now, Benny, that's enough. Straight up to your bed. Benny vowed he'd mend that toaster, make it pop all right. He thought about it through the day. He dreamed of it at night. If only it had worked all right, it would have been okay. I'll mend it, don't you worry, you could hear Ben say. At last, one night, when all alone, he got the toaster out. He'd mend it popping, make it work, of that he had no doubt. He turned it one way, then the other. Tools were all there ready. I wish I had a few more, though. I really haven't many. Excitedly, he poked around and tightened up some screws. He plugged it in, switched on, and flash! He'd somehow blown the fuse. Sparks flew out from everywhere, flashing bright as lightning, in multi-coloured hues and shades. It really was so frightening. He groped around him in the dark. At last he found the door. He stubbed his toe and banged his head and landed on the floor. He picked himself up slowly and gently felt his way to where his mother kept the things he knew would help him see. He opened up a drawer, but Father's powerful torch was missing. Oh dear, I hope I find something, Benny kept on wishing. At last he found a candle and a box of matches there, then opened up the meter cupboard underneath the stair. Brooms fell out and tins fell down. They fell upon his toes, they knocked his head and banged his back and even hit his nose. He fiddled with the wire. It seemed to take all night. At last the fuse was mended, though, and now he had some light. He tidied up the wreckage and picked the toaster up, investigated wires and plugs from bottom to the top. He poked it and knocked it, he shook it very hard, and then he banged it on the table. Everything was jarred. He carefully unscrewed it all, examined all the things, and then he put it back again and tightened all the springs. A few parts were left over, but they were mainly screws. I'll plug it in and try again. I hope it doesn't fuse. The toaster popped with all its might. The bread flew round the place like mighty flying saucers whizzing in from outer space. They zoomed across the table. They shot up in the air. Young Benny tried to catch them, but they whizzed most everywhere. Mum and Dad came in just then and got an awful fright to find the pop-up toaster popping up with all its might. Whatever are you doing? Whatever's going on? But from the pop-up toaster, 2 more slices now were done. Father got one in the eye, Asp one on the head, and when it bounced off onto Mum, she sent poor Ben to bed. Benny was so miserable. He really had been trying, but all his efforts failed, it seemed. Oh dear, he felt like crying.
"We'll send the toaster to the maker. That's the thing to do,"
Benny heard his father say. I agree, don't you? After all, the maker is the one to put it right. He made it in the first place. He'll mend it at first sight. At church, the preacher taught them that all are wrong through sin, and only God, our Maker, could put us right again.
God made us in the first place. He made us from the start. God knows just all about us, the badness of our heart. We couldn't put ourselves right, however hard we tried. Only God could help us, and that's why Jesus died. Imagine we've a toaster. It just keeps going wrong. We fail to mend it. Send it to the maker right along.
Benny sat and listened. It's just as if he knew. Of course, we need our maker, like the toaster does. It's true.
The punishment for sin is death, and all have sinned, you see. But Jesus didn't sin, and so he died for you and me. He did no sin. He did no wrong. He lived without a blame. And so he died not for his sin, but ours. Praise his name. So all the things wrong in your life, the debt of sin you owe, was paid by Jesus when he died long, long ago.
The man who made the toaster knew just what was wrong, and put it right without delay when it was sent along. The maker sent it back repaired. It's now passed every test. Benny realized right then this method was the best. The maker'd repaired the toaster. He'd put it right again. He'd taken out the faulty parts and made it right as rain. Just so, ask Jesus now to be your Savior and your Lord. Your sin will go, and you will find you'll lose sin's heavy load. He'll take away the wrongs you've done, forgive your every sin. Jesus Christ will make you new, clean from every stain. He'll put you right and set you on the path that leads to heaven, and you will have the happiness and peace of sins forgiven.